All right, hey everyone. Welcome to our workshop for today, SQL for Beginners with CockroachDB. So here we have Amruta. She's a developer advocate at CockroachDB. Amruta.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. As introduced, I'm Amruta. I'm the developer advocate at CockroachDB. CockroachDB is a cloud-native distributed SQL database. And that's a lot of buzzwords that don't really mean anything. So let's break it down. Okay, I'm admitting people now. Cool. So forget everything I just said, and let's go back to the basics and think about an app. So if you consider any app, be it a financial app like a banking app or a music app like Spotify or an Amazon card or just a simple to-do list, all of the apps kind of get data, manipulate data, and send out data. So all of it is just data. They store data, they make interesting connections between the data, and they ask interesting questions of the data. And one of the most common ways in which you store data, make connections, and ask questions of the data is relational databases. And the language to talk to a relational database is called SQL. So for all of these apps, you can traditionally use SQL. And that's what we are going to talk about today is the SQL language. SQL stands for Structured Query Language. And what it means is that it's a language that is structured. It's like English. You have definite parts of the sentence that go in particular order to make a complete sentence that makes sense. And it's a query language, which means you use that language to ask questions of your data. So if you think of a question in English, you have an auxiliary verb, you have a subject, you have a verb, you have an object, and you have a punctuation mark. And all of them serve certain distinct purposes in the sentence. And the permutation combination of these 5 components is what makes English such a powerful language. Similarly, for SQL, you have different components like the keyword, the identifier, and a condition. And you can use different kind of keywords, you can use different identifiers, and you can use different conditions. And the permutation combination of all these 3 components is what makes SQL so powerful. So to recap everything I just said, is that SQL is a language that you can use to talk to a relational database and ask questions to the database to get interesting information from it. And because SQL is so powerful, it can also get very overwhelming at times. So for this workshop, we are going to focus on the basic SQL statements. So again, going back to the first principles, if you were designing a database language from scratch, what would be the 5 basic things you would need to do with a database? You would need a way to create the database. Then you would need to tell a way to tell the system to use the database, then show the contents of the database, change the database or alter the contents of the database, and then finally drop the database or delete it. And so that's the things that you would need to manage the database. And then to actually interact with the data within the database, you want some way to put data, select that is read data, update the data, and then delete the data. So all of SQL essential statements can be captured in like these 9 statements. Like if you know these 9 statements, you know, like have a solid grasp on the basics of SQL. And all of this was a lot of talk. I talked for like 5 minutes straight, but theory is boring. So let's get some hands-on practice. So for this workshop, we are going to make a database of my favorite coworkers. These are our pretty office dogs at Cockroach Labs, and I miss them a lot. And I haven't seen any of them since the pandemic. So I want to make a database of the office dogs at Cockroach Labs so that I know where they are in the world, and then I can reach out to them if I'm ever in their city. And you are going to make that database with me. And for that, we are going to use a SQL playground because we don't want you to spend time setting up a database. So we already have a database set up for you. So if everybody can go to the link that I posted in chat and let me know if you can access it. Let me know if you see, this is what I'm this is what I'm waiting for, the mover prompt.
Yeah, I think we got it.
All of you? Okay, cool. And the statements we are going to use, I pulled them into a Notion doc for everybody to follow along. Let me know if you can access the doc. All good? Everybody can access the doc, I'm assuming?
Yep, we're all good.
Okay, perfect. Then let's get started. So what you see in the playground console right now is we started a CockroachDB database. As I introduced CockroachDB, it's a SQL compatible database. So we follow the PostgreSQL syntax. We already have a CockroachDB cluster loaded with a database called Mover ready for you to go. But we don't want to use the database Mover right now. We want to create our own database. So the first statement to run is, again, it's very similar to English. SQL is very human readable. It's simply create database called docs.crl. I'm waiting for people to respond in chat if that would be helpful because I have no other queue. Awesome. So we created a database called docs.crl. It's an empty database. It has absolutely nothing in it. But if you see at the prompt, we are still using Mover. That's because we haven't told the system that we now want to switch databases and we want to use this brand new database that we created. So the command to tell the system to use the new database is to literally, again, very human readable syntax, use the new database. And then you can see that we are now using the database that we created. But as I said, it's pretty empty right now. And I want to add some, oops, that's not what I want to add. I want to add some tables into it. So the table I'm going to add is create table named dogs and the columns. Oh, so sure. The chat's telling me to wait a second in case people are wondering why I stopped. Are we good? Okay, perfect. So now we are creating a table within the database. And the table I want to create is called docs. And I want 4 columns in the table. I want the ID. I want it to be a unique ID. And I want to put in the name of the dog. I want to put the human that belongs to the dog. And then I want to also put in the location for the dog because I want to know where my buddies are. Let me know when you get there. Okay, and I want to make sure that the table actually got created. And so I use the show table thing, and we can see that there is a table called dogs within the database. So we made our first ever SQL table. But now that I'm looking at it, I realized that I forgot to add a column for their favorite treats, because if I visit them, I want to make sure that I take their favorite treats along with me. So I'm going to use the alter table statement to add a column to an existing table. All good? Okay. So to recap, what we did so far is we did these 4 statements. Now we know how to manage a SQL database. We created a database. We told the system to use the database. We saw what contents we had in the database, and then we used the alter statement to change the database. And now comes the fun part, which is actually putting and manipulating data within the database. So to do that, I want to insert some data. Why would you do that? Don't do that. There we go. Okay. Okay, so I want to insert some data into the database. So the syntax for that is insert into the table name. Dogs is the name of the table that we want to use, and then the fields that we want to insert data in. And because I want to insert multiple values at once, like multiple rows at once, I'm going to use this format, which is specify the order of the columns in which you want to insert the data, and then insert the actual values in parentheses with comma separations. Does that help? Does that make sense? So we inserted 3 values into the table that we created. We added information for PD and Carl and Downey. Any questions so far? Yes, this recording I think will be posted to YouTube if I'm not wrong. I want to pause for a minute to see if everybody's following and if people have questions about what we did so far. That's a really good question. The question is, when I press show tables, no, sorry, when you insert, do all columns have to be populated? If you notice, we did not populate all columns because I only added information for the ID, the name, human, and location. I did not add information for the new column that we created, which is the dog's favorite treat. So if you had not specified the order in which this is like this order, then we might have gotten an error. But because I specified that this is only the subset of table that I want to populate, it goes through. Does that help? Awesome. The next question is, when I press show tables again, how come it looks the same? Because when you say show tables, that statement gives you information of only the tables in the database. It doesn't show you the content of the data of the table. That's actually what we are going to do next. So if you want to see the content of a table, the statement that you use is select. So this time I'm telling the database to select information for the column name from the table dogs, where the location is New York. Yeah, that's very easy to miss. Good question though. Another question we have is, I think I missed what the use command does. Yes. So when we started, we created a data. So again, I'm going to start from the beginning. So when we first landed on this page, what this page does for you is that it loads up a CockroachDB database for you. And the CockroachDB database that it loads up for you is Mover. It's an existing populated database that you can play around with. But because we wanted to learn how to create our own database, we created a new database called docs.crl. But the system still continues to use Mover, because at no point did we tell the system to use and switch over to the new database. So that's what the use command helps us do, is switch between databases. Did I explain that well? Okay, perfect. Cool, good questions, y'all. Keep them coming. Oops, what's happening? Okay, so to recap, from the second set of instructions, we inserted data, we inserted multiple values into the database, and we read the data from the database. We now want to see if we can update the data. So thanks to the pandemic, all my puppy friends are now at home and they're no longer in New York. So I want to update the location for whoever's location was New York. I want to have their new location be work from home. So the statement to do that is update. So all I'm telling the database right now is to update the table called dogs and to set the location as work from home, where the old location was New York. Again, my favorite part about SQL is that it's so human readable. It's like reads like English, basically. Let me know when you catch up. And if I want to see all the data from a database, I just do select star from table name. I want to type. So if you see, all the locations have been updated to work from home now. Done. Okay. And then the final statement, which always breaks my heart, but delete a record from the database, and the record I'm going to delete is PT because PT is my best friend, so I'm sure she wouldn't mind. So I'm going to delete her record and make sure that it's actually deleted because I can't see it anymore. Everybody caught up? Awesome. Okay, so those are the basic SQL statements, is creating a database, using it, seeing the contents, changing it. We haven't dropped the database yet. And then inserting the data, reading it, updating it, and deleting it. Those are like pretty basic concepts. If you're done with that, and if you still want to hang out with me, we have another thing that you can play around with. So these are like pretty basic concepts. We have like slightly advanced concepts that I want you to go through it on your own and then ask me questions as you do so. This new thing uses the database that we talked about earlier, Mover. So the database that we created had like one table and 3 records, and that's it. But that's not usually how databases are used in the real world. In real world, you have like one database with like multiple tables, and they have interconnections and they have joins. So this, now that you have a solid grasp on like the very basic essential SQL statements, now go through this tutorial and work through a slightly more complicated database. And ask me questions in chat. Oh, that's a really good question. As far as I know, the way to do that would be to drop a column and then add another column with the other data type. But I'll check and confirm that for you. Good questions, y'all. So folks who joined now, I want you to go through this interactive tutorial and ask me questions if you have any. Post that in chat again. How are we doing? Let me know if you want me to walk through it. Good question. So what's a single node demo cluster? So CockroachDB is a SQL database, like a PostgreSQL database. But if you think of like traditional PostgreSQL database, it's single node, like it's one database node and that's it. But that makes it difficult to scale data, especially across the globe. So what CockroachDB does is that it uses this concept called nodes, where each data is each piece of data is replicated twice, and then you can have multiple nodes situated at different points around the world, so that you can access the data from the node that is closest to you. So you don't have to wait for the data to like travel the whole globe if your single node is like located somewhere else. I don't know if I'm explaining this right. So basically, CockroachDB has multiple nodes to help with replication and to make sure that your data is always available and closest to your users. Does that help? But for this demo, all we did was we have just one single node to make things simpler for us. For folks who are joining now, this is the, where is it? Nope, that's not it. This is the playground we are using to try out SQL. And then these are the instructions for the workshop. So if you joined late, you can still use the playground and go through the workshop content by yourself and try out the SQL statements. And let me know if you run into problems. Thank you. I have one final resource to share with you all. So if you end the second tutorial, let me know and I'll share the final resource. That's like my absolute favorite resource to learn SQL. Yes. So the question, no. So the question is, I opened it on my own computer. Not sure if this is the test area, and it says 3 different databases already installed: default DB, Postgres, and system. So all of those are system databases that are required for CockroachDB to run. Like it's for like the internal workings of CockroachDB, but you don't have to touch any of them. You can ignore them and then create your own databases. Sure. Why does it take more time to run the shell command to display the tables in the database compared to show tables command in SQL? I'm going to say that's because of the way the Katacoda system is set up. I might be wrong, but that's like the first thing that came to mind is I think it's the way the thing that we're using to load up this database is an environment called Katacoda. And that's why there's a difference in display times. Sure. Yeah, I think we are actually overloading the Katacoda environment right now because I'm getting a warning saying it's slow. That's a good problem to have. I love that all of you are trying it out. Yeah. So, okay, now this is going to turn into an advertisement for Katacoda. They kind of, the resource management works in a way where if there are bursts, they cap it. And I think our cap is like 15 or 20 VMs running at a time. So I think we're actually hitting the cap because we are more than 20 participants right now. I had to X out of another one of my browser windows that I also had running Katacoda to help, like to let somebody else in the workshop access it. That's actually good feedback for me. I should probably have them increase the cap when we have workshops. How's everyone doing? Can you drop in chat what step you're on in the tutorial, just to get a sense of where everyone's at? Done. Nice. Okay, so if you're done with the tutorial, and you can absolutely take your time, there's absolutely no rush. But just in case you want to play with something else, this is my absolute favorite resource to learn SQL. It is a SQL murder mystery. You use SQL to figure out the mystery. It's amazing. And you should absolutely go through it. We didn't make this. This is not a cockroach resource. It's just my favorite resource. And for people who joined now, we are using this playground to go through these SQL statements. You can keep working on the murder mystery, but we have like 5 minutes left. So I want to kind of close this out in case people need to leave. So to recap everything that we discussed, CockroachDB is a cloud-native distributed SQL database. What it means is that it uses the SQL language to interact with the data, and the data is distributed, which is very rare for a SQL database to be distributed because it is very, very difficult to shard the data and manage it. But CockroachDB does it all for you. So you just need to worry about your app and we handle the data. That's like the basic promise. And it's cloud native, so you can host it on any of your cloud platforms, or you can use Cockroach Cloud where we host it for you. And you can have globally distributed apps, and you can orchestrate your data so that your users can access the data from the nodes that's closest to them so that they get very fast responses from your database. That's the basic premise of CockroachDB. And in this workshop, it talked about SQL. SQL is a structured query language, which means you ask interesting questions to the database using SQL. And the basic, I'm using the word basic so much, I'm so sorry. The essential statements of SQL are create, update, no, that's not it. Where did it go? Create, use, show, alter, drop. And then the statements to interact with the data are insert, select, update, delete. We used almost all of them in the first exercise that we did. And then in the second exercise, we learned how to interact with more than one table within the database at a time. And then we hopefully will continue practicing SQL using the SQL Murder Mystery website. And if you want to learn more about CockroachDB itself, a really good place to start is the Cockroach University course. Our documentation is some of the best in the business. I used to work on the docs team and I'm very, very proud of our work. So definitely check out our docs. And you can also join our community Slack, and you can drop by on Cockroach Labs on channel on Discord to chat with us. And we also have the best use of CockroachDB prize at the end of the hackathon. So I hope that this workshop will help you compete for that prize. And if you do, good luck. And I can't wait to see what you build with it. And we have 3 more minutes for questions if you have any. Thank you so much for joining me. Yes, absolutely. Really good point. Copy link. That's our docs, and this is our Slack.
Alrighty, everyone. Thank you for joining our session. I definitely learned a lot from this session because I never knew SQL before. Keep a lookout for 6 p.m. We have another workshop called Resources for Designers. And all of the resources that were brought up in today's session will be in the Discord channel under CockroachDB. And if you have any other further questions, you can also ask over there. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thanks so much.